topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart.
Hello, and welcome to It's Your Voice, the show that hosts enriching conversations in diversity. My name is Bahia Yaksan, and I'm honored to be able to host shows every week on different aspects of human diversity. Sometimes we do shows on climate change and how we can help support slowing down the climate change. But lately, our focus has been on healing community. And before I introduce the show title and our three guests, we have a really special guest today, and I'm very excited for you to hear from them. I do want to let you know if you're interested in any programs I coach or teach related to diversity education. I have a website, knowwhatyouwantcoaching.wordpress.com, and it's got sample classes. I tailor things for groups, secular or religious or office staff related to recognizing unconscious biases so that we can step out of them and create new societal patterns that include everyone and make everyone happier, truly. So that is my website if you're interested. And I want to what's so fun about this show, even though we're talking about a very difficult situation, is that I have never met two of the guests, but they were introduced to me by Dr. Sara Ruebelt, who has been on my show twice. So Sara will have to help me introduce them, and I want them also to add to the introduction. So let me start the introductions, and then we can share the title and topic as y'all come in. So Dr. Ruebelt, Sara, thank you so much for being back and introducing me to Dr. C, Carl C. Mack and Jr. And I am so new to this other wonderful person who's going to add to the topic. I would love it if, let me just say a little bit about what I know about who you are, a little bit about Dr. Carl Mack, and then also we'll, to be fair to myself, we just met 30 seconds ago. So I want y'all to do her much more honor by y'all introducing her than me trying.
Of course. Thank you, Bahia. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for being here. I'm really grateful. So I just want to say, Sara Ruebelt is a cross-cultural and multicultural family therapist, and she has worked with families who've immigrated from other countries, Iran, Afghanistan, Somalia, Bosnia, Vietnam. She's worked with intergenerational trauma. She's well-versed in ways to help people heal and reframe things and increase understanding. And she is also like a multicultural specialist and has much expertise. And when she knew our community was suffering, and I'll just we'll let people know after you introduce our other two wonderful guests. But let me just start by saying, Dr. Mack, thank you. Nice to meet you. I'm really honored to have you here. And I only have little bits. So again, please don't be shy about adding, but I don't even know if you still are a professor at California Alliant International University.
100% retired.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And I have some, on occasion, I do have students who will call me if they're having problems with their dissertation or any any issues around their taking up a role as a therapist and things like that. So I enjoy it when they call me, and it's not a lot of times, but I still enjoy it when I make contact.
We're not letting him retire completely.
Yeah, don't you don't look retired. And I know I just grabbed tidbits that just jumped out at me. And you were the director of African American Studies at UC Davis for a while, and the chair of ethnic studies at the Ethnic Studies Department at Berkeley, UC Berkeley.
Right.
And that you were U.S. Army Military Police and the first founding chair of the Davis Human Relations Commission. All like highly commendable things. So
Right. All an expression between my father-in-law and my dad. They were good models for me, because if they saw something that needed to be attended to, they generally were right in the middle of it all. And I just happened to
learn from them.
learn from both of them.
That's wonderful. And please, who is this other wonderful human being sitting next to you?
It's quite extraordinary, and
Yeah.
I feel so lucky that she decided to join us. Aladrian, please.
I'm Aladrian Mack, and I have spent most of my career, all of my career, in the field of child development. So preschoolers, infant toddlers have been my heart since I can remember. And I chose to have a career that supported not only their growth, but the growth of their parents and other family members.
Absolutely.
So when we started having grandchildren, I sort of put the other babies aside and just enjoyed those little guys so much. And I still do. We still do.
Absolutely. I met them. They're beautiful.
Well, they're lucky to have you, and the other children were lucky while they had you. But I'm glad your grandchildren get you.
The other aspect of my career has been, and I'm not sure how that started, if it started when Carl took over or created ethnic studies at Berkeley. But one of the hallmarks of my work has been with preschool children and their teachers, is to help teachers to see the importance of a multicultural classroom in terms of materials and activities. And I push that a lot with Head Start families, rather Head Start teachers, until they got it. Got it. So that's when I worked all over Sacramento County, and I did a program evaluation in Fairbanks, Alaska, and left those teachers with some pretty good ideas.
That's fantastic. Thank you for persisting and persisting and persisting.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It had to be.
Thank you both for your dedication to. You've done such amazing work, and you've left a legacy, and it's incredible.
And I know Sarah was very excited about having y'all join her. So let me contextualize the conversation, and then you all can take it to where you want to take it. The context is sad, and I think the reason that we're meeting at this time is we're helping a town heal and overcome a horrible travesty. And we know that this town is very fortunate compared to so many other towns, even 15, 20 minutes away. It's a whole different picture, and we are, you can say, privileged, yes, and spoiled, because we are not used to having such tragedies in the small college town of Davis, California. And that fairly recently we had 3 members brutally attacked. We had a show last week that honored the 2 individuals we lost who sadly were murdered, and a third person was stabbed. And the gentleman, one of the first victim, was a gentleman named David Bro, who had a lifelong mission to gather definitions of compassion. And our mayor and another facilitator, community organizer, Sandy Holman, last week on our show did a beautiful honoring of them. We also lost a beautiful 20-year-old young man who was brilliant and just about to graduate from UC Davis, Kareem Jamin, I think. My name is Arabic. I should say this correctly. And just really hit all of us extremely hard. And then the third person was attacked, fortunately survived. And I know her name to be Kimberly. So, so many people, like you could feel the connection across the city. We were not only experiencing grief collectively, but we lived in terror, as Mayor Will Arnold shared last week on our show. But there was also terror because there was a period of time before the attacker was found, who is now in jail. I don't know the right terms, but off the streets. Mm-hmm. So the terror has subsided to some degree. However, you all are experts on how traumatic it was. You've had clients come to you, Sarah's. Yeah. So many people were triggered, brought back horrible memories for other people. For some people, it's the first time they had such a tragic loss experience. Regardless, anyways, you're doing a lot of healing and you're hearing from a lot of people. And you and Dr. Mack both talk so much about how we need to make sure everybody feels like they belong, for not only for healing, but for prevention and the safety to draw people in and make sure everyone knows that they're loved and they mattered. Even and to do everything we can to decrease isolation and bring people.
Absolutely, I can't agree more.
Yeah.
With what you're saying, Mahia, and I think Dr. Mack and I we had a walk on the green belt, trying to put together some thoughts and reflect on things, and it was clear to me that our world is just struggling, and there's so much disconnect, so much isolation, so much fear, anxiety that holds people back from even asking, connecting, building a bridge between each other's world. And I think we can do better.
Yeah.
We just can simply do better. And
we're in a university town, and we ought to make use of the resources of the university to make our town better and better.
To create connection, to come from that curiosity stance. I mean, I think the main thought here is that when trauma happens, fight and flight response, people sometimes, it's the story we tell ourselves, right? That, the world is a dangerous place. You never know who you can trust. People are, could be bad or could be. And I think that we just have to be really careful that those narratives don't hold distortions, cognitive distortions in particular, where it's all or nothing, overgeneralizing, discounting the positives, jumping to conclusion and so forth. And it's so important to reflect and learn about incidences like this so that we can do better in the future in I think, increasing support, particularly when people are struggling, and to be able to identify when people are struggling and to, inform others who can help. It makes me wonder, for example, this young man was living with 5 other roommates, or, again, these experiences, what was it like? What was it, how do people feel when someone is struggling? What does it activate in them?
And what are some of the signs?
What are some of the signs? That's a very good question. Yes.
And you're talking about the attacker lived with 4 or 5 other people.
Yes. We just, I think it's absolutely devastating that the 2 people that, the life that was lost is absolutely devastating. They're such wonderful, good people. And I wish that it wasn't the case. But at the same time, I feel like there's so much focus and attention on this loss because people are grieving and they're connecting to that devastation and they're curious. They want to understand. And I like to see that curiosity. I'm always an advocate of curiosity because curiosity helps us grow and learn. and it's kind of like learning about our history. You can't let go and not wonder. There's so much to explore and discover. I'm interested in how we support people who are going through mental and emotional, distress.
Well, can I go back to Dr. Mack? What are some of your thoughts when you talk about how we are in a university town with this amazing, powerful university that's has incredible research done, and vet school, med school, all kinds of schools. And you said we should use some university resources to help create connection and belonging. Can you just give some examples or ways that we can tap into the university resources, whether we're students or maybe even from the outside, maybe from town residents, to use them for the collective good?
Well, I was just thinking that I was on the faculty at, I usually tell people I was on the faculty at UC Davis, minding my own business. I gave a talk at in a community, and they were members of the community who actually worked and were employees on the campus. And I gave a talk, and they said, we would like you to give that talk or something similar or in your research in the context of our community. And I did. Well, lo and behold, I took a sabbatical to be the superintendent of the school district in that community. And I thought, well, this would be great. I can do this. I can collect data. It's right up my alley as far as my research is concerned. And so I did it. And I thought, maybe a couple of years well, I did a lot more than a couple of years. It was 22 years. And then, but that led me to get involved in, through my wife, I was introduced to the National Association for the Education of Young Children. And then, of course, that led me then to, I realized that once I got on that board, that here is this association right in the Capitol itself. And I asked the question, have we done any work to make a connection between who we represent, i.e. children, and are they aware of the importance of this work relative to them being in Congress? So they had never thought about it. And so I was, I don't know, I pushed for us to go to the Congress, and everybody who was on the board identified who was their congressional person who represent their area.
Wow.
We put before them the need for them to come to be their relationship with the young children and the families and things like that. And it sort of changed. It not only changed the emphasis and the focus of our association, it also changed the thinking of congressional people and their staff about the importance of early childhood education.
And it really had people thinking and looking at what are the relationships that we have with people in their individual communities. Yes. And how do we build relationships that may not be there? If anyone who is a congressman or a representative, what do you know about the people in your district? What do you know about their needs? What do you know about what they care about? And this was one of the ways that you got people to just think about that and start looking, going home to their communities and start to build relationships.
Yes.
So that they know what's the mental health like in your district? What are the what are the health needs in your district? And we love our representatives, but sometimes they are so detached
from
the
the
people that they're
experiences.
supposed to serve. And I look at what we're hearing from in the news. We're hearing about how people respond to various respond to elements of both the Republicans and the and the and the Democrats. And then we wonder, why are people feeling okay to take a gun and hurt somebody? Why are we saying it's okay for people to come on public television and make the kind of comments that they're making that absolutely do not indicate a sense of fairness and love of one's neighbor?
Mm-hmm.
We're letting that happen.
Yeah, like parallel process.
Yes.
It is, no matter how we think we can, we're not letting our leadership or administrators influence us. The modeling is just constantly repeated, and it's impossible for our minds to not absorb it. But hopefully we get enough support to continue to focus on relationship building and connection, and not get caught into the so much horrible modeling and disrespect.
I remember when we first moved to Davis, and we've been here for over 45 years. And at the high school, our daughter started the high school. She thought we were crazy moving here in the first place, but she stuck it out. But one year there was a young Asian young man who was stabbed to death. And all of those feelings and fears and thoughts came back to me when this
recent incident
happened to our 3 citizens here.
Yeah.
And it really made me wonder, where are we? How can we not let this happen? What has happened between the time that young high school student was killed and 3 people now have just lost 2 people have lost their lives in this community that professes to be such a wonderful community? And it makes me wonder, what are we doing? How are we bridging relationships? How are we bridging friendships? And I look at, we've lived in the same house, same neighborhood for all these years, and we have these great friends and great neighbors. But does that represent this whole city?
Do we represent the whole city? That's a very good point. Are there people who are falling through the cracks, and do they have a voice, and who's advocating for them, and who's creating these bridging, between? Because I mean, I, for one, getting to know the identity behind, the person. I mean, we knew David because of his work, but learning about this student from UC Davis, who's, was such an extraordinary person in as a student, so dedicated, and he was coming home, receiving an award to go home, and it just nothing adds up. But the only thing that stands out is the person who did this was not well, was not well, and was probably suffering. And whether or not that could have been detected, whether or not support and something could have been provided to get him some help. And also, I mean, as a therapist, I'm working with students all the time from UC Davis, from high school, and I'm always advocating for them when they themselves don't have a voice. And I think that's so important. Sometimes, students open up and they might be suicidal. They might be feeling like the world is closing in on them, that the world is no longer what they recognize. They're going through tremendous challenges and difficulties. It is not easy to go through that chapter of life where you're trying to rigorously prove yourself and work hard and stay sane in terms of day-to-day challenges and making needs. and the competitiveness that is out there, and in a university setting.
And who's of course, this is a huge university, but where are this is a terrible way to put it, but where are the watchdogs that are watching for kids that are sitting in the lunch area, sitting outside alone, and who is stopping to say hi?
Yeah, it's really hard to expect that from a large university where classrooms are literally like sometimes 200 students in a classroom.
Yeah.
But what I like to propose, I love what Dr. Mack said. Carl, you mentioned something about, you got curious and you started questioning the way things are done and challenging the system, and proposed ideas to build bridges, make more connections happen. I think to have those connections between professors and students, even when student body is so large, to have, programs that are there for professors to say, I can see you're struggling. Here's an organization on campus that helps you connect to where you need to be, to get through the support that you need. I think the main thing as a therapist that comes up for me, hearing about what could possibly have gone wrong here, is the fear that people fall through the cracks and there's no so-called watchdog, no one there to pick up on that, to identify that, and to connect the person in need with resources that I'm sure is available. But when a person doesn't know that, that's when they fall through the cracks.
An experience that comes to mind is that I had a student in my class, and he was always late to class. And so I pulled him aside after one class, and I said, what's up? What's your problem? He said, ever since this class started, I have been accosted by the police and riding my bike on campus every day. And I in the beginning, it astounded me. I couldn't believe it. But then as it turns out, the person that I am, I confronted the police. First, I started with the campus police, and they said, well, we don't have any reporting of our police doing that. It must be the city. So I went to the city police, and I said, I have a student who's being harassed by the city police just for riding his bike from where he lives to campus. Wow. So help me understand why that's happening.
Fantastic that you did that.
And then I found out it was a wider piece because there were other students having similar experiences. So me being the Berkeley kind of person that I was, I confronted the police chief and said, I'm a citizen here, and I am on the faculty, and I've got students who are reporting this to me. You help me understand why this is happening. And then I realized that there were some other parents whose children were being affected in the same way. And then put together a family group, and we started having regular meetings and meeting with the police chief and the city council and other things. And I think I inherited that from my father and father-in-law. And so,
but the other thing that we did, something else that we did that I'm so sorry we stopped doing this. I think people got so busy. When we were first here, we had the connections as a community of African American families. We had a connection with African American faculty, and I don't know, maybe that's not there anymore, but we would have a big dinner every month for the first few months of school for African American students who were new to Davis, and they just loved it. I mean, some of the food was food that they were used to at home, and people got to talk about where they were from, and then they knew they would see each other on campus, and then they would become friends, and I realized we haven't done that. I bet in 30 years we haven't done that, and that would be something that particularly I'm thinking for students who are far away from home, this would be just a great opportunity to make the world smaller for them on this campus.
Absolutely. I feel like, there's just universities have increased their diversity, and there is so much to celebrate in that regard. I also feel like, even though we are a diverse community, and even though there is still, everyone needs a sense of belonging, and everyone deserves to have a community that cares about them, cares for them. It's not just that they deserve, it's a need we have, that sense of belonging, right? For our mental health, for our psychological well-being. It's required. And I wonder how many, and I'm really going to just open up right now as a therapist, because so many realities are shared in this very room in confidence with me. But I feel compelled to advocate for the fact that UC Davis students, many of them report being lonely, report being, disconnected from others, feeling, sometimes going through quarter after quarter, especially new students, even a whole entire year has passed, and they don't feel like they have a strong community or connection. I don't know how to handle that problem, other than I think it's a problem for all of us to care about. That sense of community needs to be provided.
And when you look at the campus, and what's the place where there are those kind of connections, and it's the fraternities. When we drive down Russell and we see all of the fraternity houses
They have.
but that accommodates maybe a couple hundred people. And what's happening with the rest of the kids that come here and don't know anybody? And most of I'm assuming that those fraternity houses are pretty much white-centered.
Perhaps. I think it's changing to some extent, but I also think that financially it is not always easy for a lot of people to be able to afford joining some of these clubs and organizations that you have to pay a fee, or and I worry about particularly students who can't, who are on a low budget and they don't have that much funding to increase their social circle. Yeah.
This is so interesting, because I'm thinking back to those days when we were first here, and having grown up the way we grew up, connections with other like people or connections with other community members was just a thing that we just knew to do.
Just the right etiquette.
We grew up like that.
Yeah.
Then to come to a campus where we're surprised that the connections are not there. And the dinner was great, but there probably were other things that we didn't do that we could have done, but we were so focused. That I was so worried about the presence of our two children in the schools here in Davis. There were times when I was just scared to death for them. And as a parent, I had to get involved in the schools to keep an eye on what could be happening to my own children. And there were a couple of things that happened that we were able to intervene and stop the thing from happening. But there were also families that didn't have that kind of personal power.
Opportunity.
And there were an opportunity, or thought that they could do that. So there were some families that we helped intervene. We helped them with some intervention to get their kids what they should be getting. And it was appalling to know that adults in this community, this school district, treated children of color the way they had. But that we definitely worked on that.
I think we've come. I'm hopeful that we've come a long way since, but we still have a lot of progress to obviously make.
That it's just so commendable, and it took I imagine a lot of courage for you to do that. You were I'm sure you were not surrounded by other African Americans saying, yes, let's go do this, and this predominantly That's what I encourage.
There were a few, but then there are a few who said, "Don't rock the boat, please. Don't rock the boat."
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad.
Wow. Well, it sounds like you're both like system changers. I want to go back to a couple of things that the three of you said before we go to the next topic. But the Dr. Mack, thank you for mentioning that was a serious systems change you created by listening to one student, by your attentiveness to one student. When you said, why are you late? And then he told you, I think it's a he, and you listened and you paid attention, you were concerned, and you went to the university police, then you went to the city police, and it became a group, and you confronted them in a way that was constructive and validated, found out, oh gosh, it's happening to a lot of families. That's a beautiful illustration of look what one person did by listening to someone who was being hurt.
Absolutely. And of caring, community member, and caring for your community.
Yeah. And the monthly dinners also that y'all mentioned that used to conduct. And we definitely are inviting people from UC Davis to inform us of resources that they have already established, that they need to get better and more messaging out to, because regardless, again, and thank you, Sara, for mentioning that so many students are lonely. And it's so true. Like everybody I love the way you just really emphasize being cared for is a need. It's a human need. And even a smile, like one of my sisters, I actually can't remember if she said, why don't we have a Davis, she either called it a Davis Compassion Challenge or a Davis Community Challenge.
Yes.
Anywhere where you do say hi, you don't walk past someone, you do nod, you say, how are you doing? Even if you can't help, rather than, I know so many people who have not experienced being alienated and isolated, sometimes are afraid to even open the door of a hello to someone who is experiencing alienation, isolation, or even if it's someone who looks perfectly content but lonely. It's amazing. It's powerful.
It was interesting to have at staff meetings on the campus,
faculty meetings,
that there be at least a comment or set aside a time for a discussion about your observations, faculty observations of particular students. And what are some of the signs for things? Not getting into everybody's business, but what are you picking up from?
Right.
Because some kids, this is a scary place. It's big. It's bigger than their high school. It's bigger than most places they've been in.
And also, I'm thinking of like advocacy and empowerment.
Yeah.
It takes everyone. One of my favorite Persian proverbs is drop by drop makes an ocean. I love this saying because it takes all of us. We are stronger together. And I just imagine if the university came up with an idea to advocate for mental health and really empowered people to connect each other to support services and systems, what an outreach that could be, from classroom to classroom setting. If just a few minutes is dedicated once a week in classrooms, just being able to share what resources are available and empower people to not be just bystanders observing. Because I think a lot of times people just don't want to get involved. They don't want to approach someone and say, hey, if you need help, go here or there. People, I think one of the most devastating things I hear as a therapist is, especially when clients open up who are feelers and they just observing how disconnected individuals are from one another, is disheartening to them, is painful to them. It causes them feel lack of safety, feeling like, wow, if I'm in distress, I don't think anyone will come. No one will care. And that aggravates and, amplifies that experience of anxiety and disconnect and isolation. We just simply can do better by I think, noticing, observing, and caring more.
I'm just wondering about our whole city, the city of Davis. I'm not sure what's happening with the city council or the school board, but where are we in looking at some really hotshot things that we can do as a community to look at isolation. And some people in Davis think, oh, well, my kids go to school, my kids are in college, and isolation just is not in this city.
Mm.
Of course it is. And how can we as a community look at what we can do about that? I think about the Child Development Center on the campus. And I remember being in that setting one day, and I was really concerned about, of course, the lack of diversity. But when there is no diversity in a setting like an early childhood program, how in the world are you getting across to them that they are important, that their children are important? What kinds of things do you do? One of the school districts that I worked with in Sacramento, I remember a teacher calling me and saying, well, I have a new Black parent, and she just comes to school and she works in the classroom, but she's dressed up every day she comes to school. And I'm saying, now, why is that bothering you that she's getting dressed up? And what are some things that you can say to her if you're concerned about her getting her clothes dirty or getting paint on her clothes? Can you just say that? Can you just say
that? Oh my God.
She's busy being afraid that she'll be considered racist if she says anything to this mom.
I think you brought a really good point right now.
Absolutely.
I think that when sometimes the pendulum goes from one extreme to the other, I feel like we have gotten to a place where we forget that we're all human beings in a sense, so much more closer to heart and mind than we realize, and not allow these differences among us, whether it's ethnicity, race, cultural, identity, to get in the way of connecting on a human level, and to be curious and to ask. I mean, again, coming from a not knowing stance is the best thing. When in doubt, just be curious and just say, I noticed this. I love to hear, what is that for you? What does that mean for you? How is that, just to be curious, right? But I wanted to say earlier, we talked about supports and programs. I am a very proud member, recently joined board member on Davis Schools Foundation in Davis, and that supports K-12 funding that is provided to the district. And particularly one of the main areas of funding is mental health and counseling, and to provide equitable support and services to all students, and to support our teachers, to support all the programs that are there that is needed, that the budgets won't allow to provide. And I'm wondering if that is something, again, it would be nice to see in the future guest members who are coming from the university who can talk about. For me, it's about education, it's knowledge. We want to know what these programs are. We want to know what, because, even from a therapist level, when I work with students, I like to be able to advertise that. I like to be able to provide. I know that information is there to get. I think that we can do better building that bridge and making sure people know of it and advertise it.
That I will definitely follow up on that. And I just, again, want to underscore some of the things that you're saying, all of you, especially like the thing about why don't people express themselves? That was such a great point, because, and I completely understand why often and usually when I'm hired to do a training, even if it's a 3-day event, because there's so much, and it's a lifelong goal to try to still keep uncovering what are my biases and recognize them and try not to repeat them and develop other. It's a lifelong thing. So when someone gives like 3 days, that's fantastic, and I congratulate them for taking the time. But what we hone in, what becomes the gem, is people practicing saying what they're afraid to say, practicing like remembering that we're all human, remembering the point is to connect to another human being, and stop being afraid of making mistakes. And if you make mistakes, acknowledge it. You're not, acknowledge it and step back. And maybe someone says, I don't want to answer your question. Fine. They don't want to answer your question, but that doesn't mean that you need to,
There's something wrong.
You will live.
Yeah.
You can apologize later, but making the connection is so important, and just heart to heart. And I do also want to mention that a long time ago, I was trained in suicide intervention.
Mm.
And I'm really glad I got that training early in my 20s. And I'm so grateful for that, because the number one thing that I always remember, if anyone says anything that sounds like maybe they might possibly be considering that taking their life is their best option that they can see at the moment, to ask, to not be quiet, to not be afraid to say, did you just say you'd rather be dead? What, tell me about that. And even if they say, oh, I'm just joking, that's just a joke, it's like, okay, I just needed to know that it was a joke, because there's some people who are actually really struggling with that. And to, again, express your caring, express your compassion. Remember, everyone needs it. And I just do love. I love that. I mean, of course, part of why we're so crawling out of, I think, post-COVID isolation, and it does make me sad. One of my own kids is at a university, and there was no adult contact. It was like, oh, I have to email the professor, or they don't have office hours, or the office hours are over the phone, and it's just like, can you meet a human being? I called the dean of students and said, how can my child meet a human being adult on campus to know there is an adult who has her back on campus? Because so far, all she knows is her peers and maybe the RA in the dorms. Like, build relationships.
That's right.
Like Dr. Mack so beautifully illustrated in that one little story, and how
that was touching.
You know, one of the things that you're taking me back to is this particular teacher worried about what mother was wearing. And you're reminding me of something. I asked her, what do you know about that mom's hopes and dreams for her child? You're talking about what she's got on, but what do you know about her hopes? And what does she know about your hopes and dreams for her child in that classroom? And I think when we start opening that kind of dialogue, and we're seeing each other as a real people and not just objects bringing a child into the classroom, I think teachers become better teachers and better people. And if we as a community could get to know the hopes and dreams of each other as community members.
Beautifully said.
It's beautiful.
It seems as though we would have fewer people feeling as though I'm less than, or I'm not important.
I'm writing this down.
Oh, she's got gold.
Okay.
That's a beautiful closing thought. I think we literally have 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes left. So what I want to ask is, Dr. Mack, do you have a closing thought? And
I was thinking, she reminded me, I have been trained in group relations conferences.
Yes.
And I put together, what they do is they bring people together to look at authority and leadership among themselves. And the conferences are designed to help people do that. And so we do break the whole attendees into small groups, but then we also have the group meeting as a whole, so that it's exactly a mirror of what happens in our cities and society. Mm-hmm. So some people are the groups, but then we also are crossing the boundaries of all those small groups, and we are often together in a large group. But the large group seems to be so frightening and overwhelming that people are just present for the moment and then they're gone.
Yeah.
And so I've been lately thinking about how to bring that way of studying authority and leadership to Davis.
Yeah, because he's done that. He's done that in Italy, in South Africa, and Canada. What about little Davis?
We'll be calling on you. We will be calling on you.
You're not retired.
That's right.
I'm sorry. We have to wrap up. Sarah, you'll be back on.
We'll be back on. Thank you, Bahia.
So much. You're amazing. The Mack family, Dr. Sara Ruebelt.
You're amazing, Bahia. Thank you.
I can't wait to talk more, and I'll do some follow-up. And I want to also thank our sound engineer, Rebel, and our producer, Dean, and all the listeners and viewers. Thank you for tuning in to It's Your Voice, and we'll see you or hear you if you're just on the radio next Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on W4CY.com or Talk 4 TV. And may we all have enriching conversations in diversity this week and help create belonging.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Becky.
Oh my goodness.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart.
I think you do.
And
I think
top-
she's